right, I'm Eduardo with Campus Reform. Joining us today is David Randall, the Director of Research at the National Association of Scholars. He's here today to talk to us about some of the changes we're seeing in higher education because of the coronavirus. So David, thank you for being with us today. I want to get to the first question, which is something that we're seeing at a lot of colleges and universities happening right now, and I want to get your reaction, and we've seen this at the Ivy Leagues as well, is this movement to a pass-fail system. So a lot of colleges and universities are talking about moving to pass-fail for this semester across the board. Other schools are doing, optional pass-fail where students can request to have pass-fail, or they can keep the current A through F system in place. My question to you is, what is the effect that a pass-fail system has on the classroom? Do we see any results in what the students actually walk away learning? Do we see a change in effort from both professors and students in terms of the material and the learning that takes place in the classroom?
I cannot as yet tell you what the switch is going to be right now for everybody going on, since this is obviously an experiment which is just a few days in. In general, pass-fail, no matter whether it's done by distance learning or by in classroom instruction, is a way. It lowers the expectations, it lowers the rigor, it allows students to do less work and have the D be equivalent to an A. So the effect is generally going to be to allow students to slack, where human nature will tell you that a certain number of them will take advantage.
Sure.
Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, it goes without saying that a lot of schools have to focus on what works for them. I think it really changes from class to class. Some classes it may make more sense to go to a temporary pass-fail just because of the type of material that's able to be taught online, especially in a transition that just happens in a span of days. But I guess the concern here, and it's something that I've heard from talking to students just over the last few days, is, some students have said, hey, if I had an A or B up until this point in the semester, right before the coronavirus outbreak happened, why should I move to a pass-fail? The effort I put in is not going to be reflected into my GPA. Other students have told me, they plan on attending grad school and they're concerned about what a number of pass-fail grades would look like on their transcripts. Is there a scenario or a fix that you think would be the best case scenario? Is it an optional situation where students who want to request pass-fail can do that, and other students who are satisfied with, an A through F system can continue on that course? I mean, is there a solution here where all concerns could be addressed?
I think the first thing to say is one should look first to see what is the genuine need of the university technical administration and the professors. That is it more difficult for them to do proper grading in the circumstances? One should not do it in terms of, and unfortunately I've seen this, students saying they feel stressed or educational equity requires a pass-fail system. So if there is a genuine technical need or professorial bottleneck, that's the first thing to pay attention to. My sense would be, assuming that these issues can be settled, that one ought to continue with regular grades with an option to allow for an individual request for a pass-fail, or an extension into the summer system. But in effect, that's something we already have as administrative options. It isn't very difficult to say this option is available for everyone, but you need to explicitly opt in.
Right, and I think there's some other concerns as well. I want to get your reactions to these. At some schools, we're not even just seeing movements to pass-fail in the classroom, but we've seen some students demand outright, just give us an automatic passing grade, regardless of what type of work is put in the rest of the semester. Other students across the country are just asking for A's directly. There was a Columbia University professor who wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post a few days ago who really reiterated this point and said, instead of just moving to a universal pass-fail system, we need to just give every student enrolled right now an A for the rest of the semester. What do you think that does to, or what do you think, what message do you think that sends to students? What type of effects do you think that could have on their long-term education when, again, they're able to, if instituted and implemented, they're able to receive A's in a class, receive passing grades in a class for which they have not mastered the material?
Unfortunately, it simply makes standard what is informally already the case. There is such terrible grade inflation, particularly in the Ivy Leagues, that we were already in a position where the most common grade was an A. It took very little effort to receive an A, and graduate schools and employers were already unable to use a transcript as a reliable undergraduate transcript as a reliable test of quality. We were already there. The coronavirus is simply being used as an excuse to make official the student desire to receive an A in all circumstances.
Sure. And I know you talked about a little bit, the existing procedures in place for one to opt in to pass fail, and sort of talking about how these official or more broader actions aren't exactly necessary. Do you think there is a middle ground? Do you think there's a place where students and faculty and administrations can sort of come together and acknowledge the difficult situations presented by the coronavirus without taking such drastic measures to give everyone a passing grade or to move universally to a pass fail? And if there is a middle ground, what do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I do think simply the middle ground, in effect, what I've outlined, I thought of as the middle ground, to say that anybody can explicitly request a pass-fail, but that they have to, make the request to do so. That's not actually a terribly difficult ask. And I must say, look, practically speaking, no employer or graduate school in the nation is going to be unaware that there were special circumstances this semester. I mean, we all know. So you don't need to go out of your way. And it's perfectly simple to put an asterisk on a transcript by spring 2020 and simply say coronavirus makes for unusual circumstances. I mean, you're going to have to be living in a very isolated part of the world not to know about this.
Sure. And then my last question for you on how, some of these short-term immediate changes we've seen with regards to grading, with regards to, work inside the classroom is, I guess, with regards to examinations, key parts to finishing off the semester, finishing off a course in a lot of classes across the country is a final assessment. We're seeing a lot of student requests to make finals optional. Some professors at Northwestern University actually went against the administration. The administration had come out and said, there should be no final exams this semester. Some professors said, well, we think this is an opportunity for our students to, sort of build character, to kind of, take control of their situations and be like adults and kind of prepare for a final exam. And the administration told them not to do that. Is there a way do you think it's fair, I guess, for final assessments to continue in the spring, as again, they do show mastery in the subject work? It is a way for professors to evaluate whether their students really understood the course material to move on to the next level. Do you think it's appropriate or inappropriate in this time to continue having final assessments, whether it be a paper, an exam, or whatever it may be at this time because of the coronavirus?
I would say test, final, exam. Don't use the word assessment. That's education school speak, which is supposed to be unstressful for the poor darling students. Yes, students should be tested. Character is about facing up to tests, as those professors so rightly said. I mean, thank heavens that the professors still have some gumption as opposed to the spineless administrators. Yes, absolutely. There should be strict, rigorous tests in all times. I would even say the coronavirus is a very formidable test on Americans and the world. We would want, shall we say, in all walks of life, but shall we say particularly for our doctors, our epidemiologists, our nurses, our scientific researchers, we want the best, and we want them capable of standing up to the real life test of a pandemic. If our future emergency responders can't even take a final test by distance, how will they be able to stand up to the real emergency we need them for when the next pandemic comes out of China?
Well, and that's a great point, and I think that is the point. The rest of American society, whether whether it's adults, other people in society, they're having to pick themselves up and address the situation of coronavirus, adjust their lives, and do it properly. And so, for students to think that they should be exempt from any difficulties because of this situation, or they should be exempt from their obligations because of the viruses, it just seems a little ridiculous in the grander scheme of things. Are you concerned that any of these changes that we may be seeing in higher education, whether it is some of these more lax policies to benefit, as you sort of said, the stress of students, or whether it's even just moving more to an online education system, are you concerned that any of these changes may have longer term effects after the virus has hopefully, been taken care of, and after the country moves on from the virus? Do you think any of these changes could become more permanent?
Anything done as a response to the coronavirus is likely to be a precedent, not least because, in effect, they are bringing forward by 5 to 10 years and more quickly changes that were happening anyway. That's whether for good or for ill. Distance learning is classically something which can be good, particularly with motivated students, and can be bad, particularly with slacker students. But we're getting a lot more distance learning very quickly, and it's unlikely to go away entirely. I would say that whatever change we make, we should be aware that it will be a precedent. Anything adopted temporarily may very likely be permanent, and we should make our changes aware that this may happen, very likely.
And then my last question for you, and then I want to leave the floor open to you to kind of address maybe some changes we're seeing in higher education that I didn't bring to the discussion. But we sort of talked about some of the negative effects that the coronavirus has had on education and has had on learning in the classroom. Have you seen any positives? Have you seen any reactions to the virus in higher education that some may look at and say, well, we should have been doing this before. Maybe we can continue to do it in the future. Are there any positives that higher education can or has seen because of the virus?
The positive side of distance education is that it is a tool. It is useful for professors and students to be able to use that tool appropriately. So for that basic acquisition of technological skills, and indeed lesson building skills for professors, that doesn't hurt. You may not want that as an ideal, but a little boot camp in how to do a class over the internet isn't bad. I believe that it would be most useful if we could see what we can do without in higher education. That is, what is unnecessary, to wit, an awful lot of the higher education administrators who's mainly seem to be trying to work to make the classes be easier, then we could do without. The coronavirus is perhaps useful to clarify who is not exactly necessary on the campus. But how shall I put it? The administrators are the least useful class, and they're the ones who are going to be looking and trying to take lessons. They are probably not going to try to notice terribly hard that they are unnecessary. So whatever lessons can be learned, it perhaps requires people outside of the education establishment to take a hard look at what's going on as a result of the coronavirus.
Well, that's a great point. We report on a lot of the unnecessary positions, spending, and all these things that occur on college campuses. Maybe, like you said, the coronavirus will highlight what is truly necessary versus not necessary. Mr. Randall, I want to thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out to us if you think there's a development that we should be talking about here at Campus Reform. We'd love to have another chat with you. So again, I just want to thank you for taking the time.
How's it going? I'm Eduardo Norette with Campus Reform. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to subscribe to get our latest content, click right here. If you're interested in joining our team as a correspondent or an investigator, click there. And if you want to donate to make sure we can create more great content like this, click right here.